Let's go. Discussion on short-term tourist rentals.
This might be more information than you ever want to know about short-term tourist rentals.
Actually, we want to know so we can streamline this process.
Okay, so a short-term rental, according to our zoning ordinance, is a single-family dwelling not attached to any other dwelling by any means located on an individual lot that is rented for compensation for periods of less than 30 days. That's the most important part of that definition. So if you're more than 30 days rental, you do not fall under the short-term definition. They are allowed in various zoning districts in the county by conditional use permit. So in each of the zoning districts we have, which agricultural, residential, rural residential, there's a list of things you can do by right, which typically a single-family dwelling is by right. But then there's a list of things you can do by conditional use. And conditional use allows you to apply through the Planning Commission and Board of Supervisors for the short-term tourist rental. So the conditional use, it's up to the Board of Supervisors to determine if that is a use that's harmonious and compatible with the neighboring uses. So does it fit in that neighborhood, in that area where they're applying for? Oops, sorry. So conditional use permits, the board, just really briefly about conditional use permits. The Board of Supervisors can put conditions on the permit that restrict noise, dust, or anything that may affect surrounding neighbors. So you're trying to limit the impact of that use on the surrounding properties is the main goal of a conditional use permit. Setback requirements you can put, so you'll have additional buffering, adequate parking and access to public streets. So we normally, for a lot of other things, we get VDOT, permission. Not for this, obviously, because it's not more traffic typically than a regular house. But, you can provide adjoining property units with a buffer. And this is really the most important, to prevent such use from changing the character and established pattern of development of the community. So you don't want to come in and allow some kind of conditional use permit that would change, the residential character of that community, or whatever the character is of the community as it exists now. So the board can put, conditions on the permit that would alleviate the impact on neighbors. We have 25 short-term tourist rentals currently in Warren County that have been permanent through the Board of Supervisors, and then we have 16 rentals that were determined to be grandfathered in prior to our ordinance coming into effect in 2012. We had a BZA appeal that kind of kicked this all off in 2012, a little before that. But that was kind of when short-term tourist rentals were really becoming popular. Oops. Okay. They were really becoming popular then. And so our zoning administrator at that time had sent a zoning violation to one in Shenandoah Farms that actually wasn't in compliance with their health permit, and they were just weren't in compliance really with anything in our zoning ordinance. So, but what happened is the BZA determined that we actually needed in our code something where someone could apply to do that. So since we didn't have that, we went ahead and amended our ordinance to put this use in there, and we worked with homeowners associations all around the county and the public to establish these supplemental regulations that went with our ordinance. So everything prior to 2012 is just grandfathered in, the ones that were up and running at that time.
So the total is 41. Okay.
And that 25 is active. Okay, they're active, because we actually had some others that were approved, but they are no longer operational.
Okay.
So the 25 are active.
25 or 41 active.
It'd be 41 total if you count grandfather.
They're active as well.
So they're active, yeah.
Okay.
So we have, this is a map of all of our, and they're pretty spread out all over the county, as you can see. So these are the supplemental regulations I was just speaking about. Basically, A just says that they have to get a conditional use permit, and the county can revoke the permit for repeated noncompliance with these standards. We have not done that for any of our short-term rentals. We have done that with maybe 2 conditional use permits in the past. The maximum number of occupants in the dwelling shall be determined according to the Warren County Health Department, their septic permit. And it cannot exceed 10. You usually see about 6 or 8 occupants. So a 3 to 4 bedroom house, they do vary. And we always include that on a condition of the permit. We send comments to the health department so they know and they can comment. They can go out and check the septic system over, or whatever they need to do. Parking, you have to have adequate parking in the driveway, so there's no parking along any right-of-ways or in yards. So that's just an example of adequate parking. Property boundaries, this was a big thing. Nobody wants people trespassing onto their property, so this always comes up as we go through the conditional use permit process. So property boundaries have to be clearly marked. We go out and inspect the property prior to them starting the short-term rental to make sure that you can tell where the people will be able to tell where the property lines are. Also, in the property management plan, that has to be on file there and usually attached to the rental contract. It's typically has a map of the property showing the boundaries. There should be no visible evidence of the conduct of the short-term rental outside the outside appearance of the property. We usually don't have a problem with that. A fire extinguisher shall be provided and visible in the kitchen and cooking area. Smoke detectors shall be located in all locations as identified in the building code, and a carbon monoxide detector shall be installed on each floor in every dwelling. That we worked with building official and the fire marshal when we did these supplemental regulations. The owner of the dwelling shall give the county written consent to inspect the dwelling to a certain compliance with all these performance standards. Upon a 24-hour notice. We honestly do not get a lot of complaints about the short-term rentals that we have. They're usually the owner is in good contact with us. We typically get water samples from them every year that we have on file in our office. So we haven't had a problem with that. The property management plan is required. A lot of times we don't have that at the Board of Supervisors when we come here. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. But it's on file, and we always get it prior to them starting to rent the dwelling. And we keep that on file in our office. And
Can you not ask for that in advance?
yes, I think we can. It's just something they put together.
Well, I know, but
Yeah.
one of those things on the management plan, I would assume, is who's
The
going to be the
contact.
emergency
Yes, sir.
contact?
Yes, sir, we can.
And it
Okay.
seems to be a sticking point
Mhm.
in every one of these
Yeah.
short-term rentals with the neighbors, is that they want to know that there is somebody local who will be able to address it, like you've got up there, an unruly tenant or, a utility problem. They want to know there's somebody local, and that, I think, can go a long way to preventing
ease
these
some of the
long,
problems. Yeah.
drawn out.
Yeah, we can require that at the time of submittal. In a lot of times we do have that, but the last one we didn't.
Right, and that was a point of contention
mhm.
with his neighbors.
Yeah, I understand.
Be somebody within a distance, like 30 miles or something, rather than something in Washington, is what I heard the board talking
Yeah,
about
they were in
last time, is they
Washington.
wanted,
Can we put that as a requirement for these short-term rentals, that they have to have someone a certain distance?
I wouldn't see why not, doing like a 30-mile radius, or, do you see any problem with that?
Not that I can think of right away. I can't think of anything in the code that would prohibit us from doing that. I can look into it just to make sure, but I think we can.
We've had people from higher property management companies from Luray. There's a company down there that.
Luray has several, and they're
Yeah,
popular.
and they're pretty popular. So then we've got to have a couple that use that. And then
That's why I was thinking a 30-mile radius. I would hate to exclude, the property, because especially if they're in the southern part, they're right there. If they're in
Well,
Luray.
Luray doesn't have a large hotel room space, and so what they've done in order to become more attractive to tourists is they've approved a lot of short-term rentals. I've done a little investigating into what Luray has
They
done,
have.
and that's the reason.
In Page County, I mean, it's pretty rural when you
It
get
is
out. I mean, it really is. I mean, so it's not affecting, neighborhoods a lot of times.
Right.
The problem here is we have a lot of, like Shenandoah Farms, I mean, you're on a pretty small lot up there, and you're just meeting the setbacks.
Right.
So I think that's why, it makes sense to have the conditional use where you can put conditions that would help to not impact the neighboring properties.
Yep, I get it.
Yeah, I'll just mention with property management plans, we always bring that up during the initial application of the use. And usually I'll provide, or Joe will provide, some templates of existing ones for folks to kind of look at, oh, okay, this is what I need to put in here, this is what I gotta have. We always tell them, put contact information, and certainly lately, we've been definitely telling them, you got a local person who's gonna be doing the property management, please have that available and in there, So as far as amending the ordinance, I mean, I'm not sure if we, it would be, yeah, we could, but we could also do it as a condition, but we are addressing that at a staff
Well, it just
level.
seems, especially with the last one,
Yeah,
and I
Yeah.
get it, they want to save money, but
yeah,
being their own property manager instead of having to pay someone to do that service, so I get that side of it. But when that was as much an issue for every property owner close to them,
yeah.
they understand from the get-go, that's a requirement versus
Sure.
that's a choice.
Sure, yeah.
So that way, it kind of takes all of us out of that hot spot, which, I don't want to be in a hot spot necessarily, but these things are.
They can be very controversial. I mean, sometimes they're not, sometimes they are. And you never really know. We never know when they first apply.
Excuse me. Is it property management or is it a checkpoint? I mean, in case of emergency, call this number. And that person can run over and turn off the water. Or that person can help you with calling the police or whatever, but they've got a personal contact within a few minutes.
I think it could be either. I mean, a lot of times people do employ a property management company because they're not from here. We have people who live in Bethesda who have rentals here and they just don't know anyone.
Well, I think the whole idea, I believe, and maybe I'm wrong with this, but for us to approve it, we want to be able to say, who are you going to call in case of a problem?
I
It can
understand.
be the management company or your neighbor that right this minute, but your property manager may call because it's a plumbing issue they're going to have to deal with.
Right.
One's a few minute thing and one's a long-term thing.
I understand. Yeah.
Okay.
I think we could do that. I mean, I think we'll definitely start getting the property management plan in the beginning, so that you have and a contact
Yeah.
and a property man, however they want to handle it,
The
however they
homeowner
want.
could be the property management person or group, but
They need
just
someone
somebody
close.
local enough.
I understand.
Okay.
Just some more, we had a lot of issues with these being in homeowners association subdivisions with HOAs. So we put in the ordinance that we receive a recommendation of approval or disapproval for them to operate. That doesn't, it's just a recommendation, so it's up to the Board of Supervisors. It's just to have in there to see if it is in compliance with, their subdivision.
If a person is applying for the COP, shouldn't his neighbors know whether they're an HOA or a POA or anything?
So we always notify the neighbors.
Okay,
They always get notified of the public hearings. But with the application, we want the letter from the HOA, either recommending
but
approval
if
or
there's an
denial.
official one, yeah, there.
Yes, but sometimes there's not,
Yeah,
right, just if there is an official.
Do we advise them not to pursue it if their HOA prohibits it? And then they do, sometimes they do anyway. Okay.
We always tell them to talk to your neighbors for every use that comes in our office. If it's a conditional use permit, your neighbors are going to get a letter.
Yeah.
We advise them to talk to your neighbors first. I mean, so they're not upset when they get a letter from the county saying,
Right.
hey, this is what your neighbor is asking to do. So
Right.
it's always better if the neighbors talk to each other, like I said before, they're getting the letter from the county. The short-term tourist rental shall have a landline. The phone number servicing the short-term rental shall be included in the property management plan. That's more for the 911 purposes. We typically don't have a problem with that. The owner shall provide an emergency evacuation plan. A lot of times, the person, maybe from out of town and not familiar with the area at all. So
So
that's,
Karen, we had one that Ms. Cullors aptly pointed out didn't have a plan for if the river got up. And so would that requirement fall under like an evacuation plan should there be a flood? Because that was one of the reasons that we didn't approve it was because there was no plan. He didn't have one. Do you remember that one, Cheryl? Yeah,
Valley Retreat.
I believe it was, yes.
Yeah.
That not only says you go out this route or this route, but when they're that close to the river, that explains how quickly the river could come up and so forth. Because, you go to bed and the river's at the top of the bank and you wake up the next morning and you got water next to your bed. It's a big
Yeah.
difference.
I think that's a valid concern.
I don't know if we can add something
I mean,
that just says
it could
that-
be in their property management plan if they are in the floodplain or near the river.
Yep.
We can have them include that.
We have a few over there off of Benny Beach,
Yep.
Riley's. And the properties themselves aren't jeopardized, but if there was a significant flood, Benny's Beach is the only way to get out of there. And Benny's Beach will be covered. So they may be stuck there more often than not. They'll be safe, if they stay where they're at, but to try and go down on Benny's Beach during a major flood event wouldn't be a wise thing. So,
Yeah, I mean, that's
those are the
a-
kind of things we could have them put in the plan.
And people, if you don't live there and understand it, they may try to get out and they realize too, there's a point where this is when you need to leave and how you need to leave.
Yeah.
This is a point, it's beyond leaving and this is what you need to do now.
Right,
So,
And it's definitely appealing for someone to come rental on the river. So we can,
Well, that's
we
what
can
draws a
definitely
lot of them here.
Mhm. So sure, we can definitely do that. Include that in the property management plan. Are you taking notes? Mental notes. A copy of Chapter 123 is our noise ordinance. So that is provided that's usually provided in the property management plan. Failure to comply with the approved conditions, subject to revocation, like we talked about. All outdoor burning is in compliance with Chapter 92, and sometimes we've restricted outdoor burning and shooting as well at some of the ones that we have in the county, if that was a concern when they were coming through. And then the setback, it shall be a minimum of 100 feet to all neighboring residents. And that's all I had. We can definitely get the property management plan prior to coming to the Board of Supervisors and then incorporate all those concerns.
I think it
And
would
see
go
where
a
we go.
long way to shortening the public hearings because they've become, some of them are hour and a half long, which is just so extensive.
What, I
We didn't
mean,
see that that last one because of the state.
Well, it was right on the state road. We anticipate it a lot of times if it's in a subdivision, or especially if it's in a gated subdivision. But when they're right on the state road, a lot of times we don't think that's gonna be an issue,
I
but,
that one was a shoe in last time.
so, yeah, you never know. I mean, you just don't ever know, so.
is there such a thing, I mean, in your summary sheet, can you put, I mean, we talked about this a couple of times, but can we just put a check sheet? So we don't have, I mean, there's a ton of stuff on every piece that we have to read through.
Yes, sir.
Why can't we just have, they have they have talked to their neighbors. There is an HOA plan, there is an emergency exit and a contact person. So you just have a checklist of
Yeah.
all of the things that are necessary for this particular house.
And we normally put that in our staff report, but it's very wordy. So
what?
it's wordy because we put all the supplemental regulations in our staff report. And then basically right after each one, we put that they've complied. But we could do a shorter just checklist.
Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
That
if
they're
it was just like
compliant.
listed with boxes
A
checked, that we
one-pager.
know that they have said that they've done this, that would be great. They have a property manager, they have a person with a number, they have a plan, evacuation plan, they have, we can't impact state roads.
right.
That one I was like, okay, but we can, at least have the checklist of the things that we do have to consider. And we can say to people, their neighbors, we have this and this is what they've checked that they've done.
Now, I do have one question, and this, we've had a few where a waiver was requested from dwelling to dwelling. And the planning, and it was a fairly reasonable amount, but the planning commission agreed to the waiver and forwarded it to the board, and then the board, waived that 100-foot setback from dwelling to dwelling.
Well, we've talked internally about that we don't want to encourage
So
that.
right
The
now-
supplemental regulations are the supplemental regulations, and we're
Yeah.
just trying to stick to them.
So,
Yeah, there's a line in the ordinance that says they can be waived, but you get into a whole,
and I guess that's why I was just bringing that up also, is we try and vet that, we look at that when people are looking at doing short-term tours around, and.
Because the requirement's 100 feet, correct?
The
What's 100 feet?
requirement's 100 feet. So just as long as we know, number one, that you guys are going to, we do not want to do any waiving, and from the attorney's standpoint, a good recommendation.
I don't, the only, when we waived it, the property owner owned both lots.
Yeah.
Or we've had a letter from the neighbor saying they didn't mind the waiver, however, they might move, and then the next person might mind the waiver. So I'd really like to stay away from that if possible.
So that's kind of a check.
So you discourage it, and I think that's wise.
Yeah.
There's so many other issues. I mean,
Yeah.
typically, I mean.
Well, and like you say, if I own the house and I don't care, but I sell it to Mr. Fox and he does care,
Mhm.
we've created an issue for ourselves.
Yes.
So
Very.
better not to go there if you don't have to.
I agree. Do you have any other questions, or does that answer your questions?
It's good, thank you.
Okay, sure.
Good job.
Okay.
Those changes cover everything that you were asking about?
Yes.
I guess the one thing, and that would be more, do we get a business tax or anything off this, or is short-term? Because I know
Lodging
there's
tax.
something about, some things are, it's considered a business, but another, and I don't remember which way that was.
They
So
pay lodging tax.
they do pay lodging tax, and we require that they register with the Commissioner of Revenue's office, and to do that, we give them a zoning permit. There's a Supreme Court decision that basically says the use itself is considered residential. They still have to pay lodging.
So they do the lodging, but they're not considered a business.
Right.
So they have to have a business license or.
Realtors are exempt from the business license. But the landlords rather, not the landlords. So therefore, these are in that category as a landlord for that purpose, so they don't, as opposed to a motel that does have to pay a business license. So they're, kind of go back
I think
and
the
forth.
way, I think he means that the homeowner doesn't have to get a business license.
Right.
But
They have to
do-
register for
Right.
lodging.
They have to
They have to
register
pay the
as a
tax.
lodging so that they are, because the way it was described to me, I think either Matt or Taryn had described it to me, is that we have to put them on equal par with hotels because it's a disadvantage to the hotel to have all these places for rentals that don't have to comply with the same regulations that the hotels have to comply with. And so therefore, but they're not essentially a business.
Okay,
Right,
that
so
was my
the
understanding.
motel
Is a business,
pays a tax, a business license.
right.
This is categorized as a landlord for that purpose and does not have to have a business license. But they do have to have the lodging tax with the motels over here. So they're a hybrid in between.
So we get 3% or something or whatever, 3% of the, yeah.
5, isn't it?
I think it's
Yeah.
five.
Isn't it
It's
5?
now.
Yeah.
And I thought so.
It's
That-
five.
I'll mention though that a lot of these folks who have these, put these in an LLC, kind of to protect them. Something happens, they're not being sued personally, their LLC is sued, whatever. And so they'll have a business license issued to that LLC after they receive the certificate of zoning from us, after they've completed everything, they're in compliance with zoning. And then in that process of filing for that, the transient lodging they're filed for that and put on that database.
Yeah.
And as long as, the interesting thing is, and it's just something I found out recently, if they're not doing it, the Commissioner of Revenue does want them to submit, to get on that transient lodging database, so that when they do choose to do it, within a time period, they're already set up there. They can just start submitting it, and they can let the Commissioner of Revenue know one way or another if they rent it or not rent it, and they're okay. And they said there's not a fee for that initially. So,
But there is a
No,
fee through
Matt, and Taryn, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you. How many have we had that have been a problem? None? So that's the thing is that I'd like the public to understand is that their objections and those what ifs are never realized in usual, like the one that we approved for the gated community in my district. In COVID, they ended up moving here because they wanted to have their kids out of the city and they ended up living in it. So it has not been a problem.
the only one that we've had an issue with, it was denied by the board.
Right.
It was in Mosby Overlook Estates.
I'm familiar with that-
And went
that
to
case.
extensive litigation with that property owner.
Yeah,
But that was denied by the board.
Yeah.
You didn't even get the CP, so.
But kept doing it.
Yeah.
well, thank you all so much for your insight.
Thank you.
Thanks, Tim. Yep.
Mr. Bean, the overview of building inspection. Thank you, sir. Appreciate it.
Yelling at you. Thank you, Mr. Bean. I appreciate it.
And I believe this is going to be up on the PowerPoint as well, Dwayne.
I'm going to move so you, that I'm in your view.
That's quite all right.
I'll sit over here.
Good afternoon. I'll try to make this short. If you have questions, though, jump in or ask at the end. Warren County Building Inspections Department. Building Inspections Code Administration, as allowed by the Uniform Statewide Building Code, is to protect the occupant's health, life, and safety. to ensure that every time you walk into a building, you can understand that that building has been inspected and should meet the minimum health, life, and safety requirements. That's what the objective is as far as the code. Requirement for establishing a building inspections department, Section 104, it also actually goes back into the Code of Virginia. If you look there, I don't know if I do have a pointer right there, Section 36105 of the Code of Virginia. Most people don't understand that the building code, the Uniform Statewide Building Code, is actually part of either the administrative code or the Code of Virginia. So it's not something that's just a document out there that is put into place to restrict people from doing what they want to do. But it is a requirement for each locality to have an inspections department that's mandated by the state. Building Inspections Department jurisdiction. Town of Front Royal, July 24th, 1983. Meeting voted to have the county oversee the inspections department. There's a copy of their minutes. There's also a copy of the minutes for the Board of Supervisors that also codifies this. So you can take a look at it. And where I'm pulling that from is, if you look back at the last slide, and, whoops, right there. Down here at the bottom, for the purposes of this section, towns with a population of less than 3,500 may elect to administer and enforce the USBC. However, where the town does not elect to administer and enforce the Code of Virginia, the county in which the town is situated shall administer it. So in 1983, the town chose not to administer their own. Now they can change that. They would have to develop their own department and everything else, but that is the reason that what we inspect in the town and the planning and zoning don't take over the planning and zoning, because they choose to do that portion of it themselves. Requirement for appointing of a building official. The Code of Virginia actually requires each locality to appoint a building official. That's the only position that is required to be appointed for the building code. Now, you can appoint a property maintenance official, you can appoint a fire marshal, a fire official. That's where Jerry Maiatico comes in. But it is required by the state in the Code of Virginia to appoint a building official. Our inspections department is made up of myself, Deputy Building Official Mark Robinson, Permit Center Supervisor Paula Fristo, Building Inspectors Kent Tampkin and Adam Moore, Permit Technician Jacqueline Longmire, Part-time Permit Technician Michaela Amarode, and a part-time Building Inspector right now is vacant. We're finding it very hard to find somebody that actually can carry the qualifications to actually do inspections. There is a grace period, as the state gives, of approximately 18 months to get your first certification to be able to do inspections. So what I have done in the past, when we've had that requirement and need, we've had as many as 3 part-time inspectors throughout my tenure here. I was actually one of them as I started here, but 3 inspectors, but they were actually individuals that went on to become either full-time, or we had people that were retired, and we were able to utilize that aspect as far as to fill that position. The last one that we had was Gary Showman, who is the prior, one of the prior Shenandoah County building officials. Gary is pretty much retired at this point in time. His last item was to oversee the development of the Sheriff's Department for Shenandoah County. They have actually asked him to come back and fulfill the building official's capacity for a short amount of time, because they are actually without a building official at this present time. So, organizational chart. As the building official, I oversee the entire department, but the deputy building official steps in when I'm out of the office, or if there's anything that actually needs to go through him. Plans reviewer, building inspectors pretty much speak back to either Mark or myself. The permit center supervisor handles the permit technicians as far as any oversight or anything. Department budget. Our department budget was $617,829 last year. Of that, $518,200 were for staff and benefits. Our software per year is, let me see if I can get this up here, is the $45,000. That's what our contract approximately runs. The $3,000 additional is for the computer equipment, things of that nature that we need to operate those items as a capital budget item. Operating budget of $51,629. That covers the motor vehicles, code book subscriptions, office telephone, postage, advertising, travel and training for required certifications, and also the mobile data plans for the iPads that are used in the field for the software. One of the things that is very effective for our inspections is that we can actually update the software as we're doing the inspection. The iPads give us the ability, even if we're outside of the cell service, which you know is very common in South River, to actually store that information until it gets into a data area, and then it uploads it. So we have very quick information. We also are able to email from our app, or from my iPads, to the contractor if they have desired to get information as to whether they've passed or failed, or what the results are. So they're keeping that information going.
Mr. Bean, what
Yes.
is the $48,000 capital budget?
That includes the 45,000 and the 3,000.
Okay, so
The two together.
that's under it.
Yes,
Okay.
yes. Budget overview. Our budget again for 2021 was $617,000. If you look at that in comparison, the budget that we had in 08 and 09 was actually 4.06% higher than it is right now. So we've actually gone back. We have had 2 years that we had 18 and 19% reductions in our budget, just because the economy didn't support what we were doing, because the construction wasn't there. However, if you look during the 2007 timeframe, we had 251 house starts. Right now, we're projecting 190 house starts. So we're actually doing just a few less, with actually a larger budget in the 2007, which we were projecting for the 08-09. We're doing it for less at this point in time. So a little bit of comparison. During the 2004 timeframe, we had the highest new home starts of 429 homes. That's been kind of the elephant in the room, because that is a very substantial number for what our department could handle. If you look though, during that time frame, we had one additional full-time inspector than what we have right now. We have 2, it would have been 3. We had 2 part-time inspectors at that time that were running pretty much full schedules. That was before the time frame that you could only work 28 hours per week. They were working full weeks, but they were part-time status. Also, we had additional permit technicians. So instead of 2 full-time, we had 3, and as well as a part-time permit technician. Building code committees and responsibilities. One of the things that we have to do by the code is to provide a secretary staff support for the local appeals board. That is my permit center supervisor, Paula Fristo. The duties for that: intake all appeal applications, scheduling of the meetings, keeping the minutes, distribute the board findings, and all required parties. It's something that doesn't regularly happen, but it is something that has to be taken care of each and every time. Currently, we have a fee of $100 to try to offset those expenses. Sometimes, for the betterment of the community, we actually do waive that fee. So it's something that we're just not taking in because it just wouldn't look appropriate at that time. Department responsibilities. We try to provide high-quality customer service to assist the public daily with questions. Permit applications, code, erosion and sediment control, stormwater management, health department, VDOT, property maintenance. Now you may ask, well, we're not doing stormwater, so why do we answer questions? Actually, the very first person they call is the county to see, do you administer the stormwater program? No, but we can't do anything past the plan review for erosion and sediment control until you get through stormwater. So we have to actually address all those questions and then direct them in the right direction as to who to call, who to speak with at DEQ. Health Department, we have a lot of calls come in where it may be well and septic. We have to send them to the Health Department because we don't regulate that. Property maintenance. The town has adopted a property maintenance, but they actually haven't actually taken it on. Got an auto power off it, Dwayne?
Oh, it's television.
Oh,
Yeah, it's TV itself, it's not.
oh, okay. How do I do that, Dwayne? The TV says it's getting ready to turn itself off in 40 seconds.
39, 38.
27.
There we go. Again, the town has adopted the property maintenance, but they actually haven't put it together a department for that or funded it at this point in time. So we get those questions now because it's been advertised, there's property maintenance in the town of Front Royal. To use the phrase, who are you going to call? You're going to call the code official to find out what you can do as far as property maintenance. Assist applications and applicants in filing permits, building, residential, commercial, mechanical, plumbing, electrical, fuel gas, fire protection, alarm and sprinkler, elevator, change of use and occupancy classification, erosion and sediment control, and the list goes on and on and on. It is a vast thing that we have to deal with. Plan review for the Virginia Uniform Statewide Building Code, review for all permits previously listed. Reviews require knowledge of the site and structures that surround the work area. If you're getting a permit to put in new windows in a building that is down on Front Street or South Street, we need to know what's next door, and we also need to know where your property line ends, because there are setbacks because of fire requirements. So not only does it actually include the building, it also includes the surrounding areas. Re-review of plan amendments as requested. If somebody changes something specifically more on the structural or fire accessory or escape egress issues, we need to verify that and re-up their plans. Reviews include structures that are regulated by the floodplain management. This comes into effect as far as when our floodplain manager determines that it is in an area that is reflective of a floodway. We have to actually review it to make sure that the building code is applied to those structures so that the water passes freely through that structure. Pre-submission meetings. The existing building code, which actually is more encompassing than the construction code, because once the building is built, it then becomes an existing building. So there is a requirement for the building official or the building inspections department to hold pre-submission meetings for any existing building customer that wants to have that. So we could be discussing a building that may never actually happen because during the discussions they say, well, you know what, it's going to cost too much, or I don't think I'm going to want to try to do this in this particular location. Review and comment on plan department requests. Each time something comes through the planning department, whether it be county and or town, they ask for comments as far as anything for building code comments, as well as erosion and sediment control. Work with the zoning department on complaints. Actually, I should have taken that one out because I think I actually cover it a little bit further down. Department responsibilities, in fact, right here. Coordinate and work on new projects with following departments: health, fire, law enforcement, Department of Social Services, Town of Front Royal. Actually, that wasn't the one. Past 20 years, we've seen 2 new shopping centers, Blue Ridge Shadows subdivision, Odin Ridge Happy Creek subdivision, which actually I think was pre-20, but it's actually continuing on through this. Dominion Power Plant. $1.3 billion of investment out there. We were on that site every day for over 4 years doing inspections. RSW Regional Jail, new high school, Skyline, major renovation high school, Warren County, major historical renovation middle school, Warren County, new middle school, public safety building, major renovation to the Warren County Health and Human Services, Samuels Public Library, and the encompassing new Warren Memorial Hospital. Code development. This is where it's kind of interesting to understand how the code starts and where it all comes from. The ICC, the International Code Council, is the developer of the major model code. There are several other model codes. In fact, most people don't know, even in the code areas, that National Fire Protection Association, NFPA, has their own building code. But not very many people adopt it or choose to use it as a model code. ICC is one of the biggest ones. It gets updated every 3 years because of new technology, new construction, things of that nature. And it actually does take the 3 years to get through the building code, all of the codes, to get them updated. If you read that second bullet point at some point or another, it tells you how that goes into process. Incorporation by reference. Again, this goes back to the Code of Virginia and the Uniform Statewide Building Code. The USBC incorporates the model codes by reference, but then it also changes those codes to fit Virginia. Incorporation by reference, that gets into where it talks about as far as the Code of Virginia and incorporating them in. Virginia adoption of the model codes. So, you see that right now, 2015. That is the code in which we're actually constructing under right now. We're in 2020, almost 2021. ICC has their codes approximately the same time. The 2021 codes are going to go into effect as 2021 comes in for the model codes. That's the standard. Virginia is 3 years minimum behind ICC because it takes us 3 years to go back and look at the codes and tweak them the way that Virginia wants. And Virginia is very unique because they actually contact and make sure all stakeholders are there to provide input to this. So instead of somebody coming back and saying, well, I didn't have any say-so at the ICC because I can't get there. Well, actually you do, because if you participate in Virginia, you can put your code to change right into Virginia. So we do approximately the exact same process in Virginia. Code update training. Once that code is approved and adopted, which is coming up right now, we're getting ready to adopt the 2018 code, which will be going into effect. Code update training has to be done. The Code of Virginia says that DHCD is required to provide that code update training. Now, DHCD is great, but they're not code officials, so they look to the local jurisdictions, myself included, to help develop this code update training. So as it stands right now, I've been in part of the ICC code development process, and I've also been part of the DHCD development process, as well as the code update training program. So that's what some of the department things go on. Code update adoption and process. This goes into when the training is required, how it's required, how actually in 2018 when we adopt these, well, in 2021 when we adopt the 2018 codes, there's a year grace period. So we adopt it, but you have a year still to build under the old code before you have to actually fully adopt the new code. So it is a very staggered and very stepped process. That Virginia doesn't want to say, here's the line in the sand, you've got to meet it.
Now, do we as inspectors?
Not always, for the simple fact that there are some things that are life safety that you cannot overlook. You've got to do it. However, the spirit and intent of what the code says is what you have to look at. So I'll use very vague information as far as that goes. If the code said it had to be a shade of red, and it was a kind of an off shade of orange a little bit, does it really meet the intent of what the purpose of being that color is? Yes, okay. We can live with that. It's met the code, the intent and spirit of the code. Some things, every single house requires a 3.0 door, side hinged, going out of the house. And it can't be through the garage, and it can't be through a mechanical room. So that is a hard and fast one. We just had one where the owner of the home that was being built wanted a 2.8 door. That was the door that they wanted. It wasn't because it was a 2.8 door, it was because that was the style they wanted. We told the builder, I'm sorry that the customer really wants this, but you still have to put in the 3.0 door somewhere. You have to provide it. Short story long, however, but they did have a 3.0 door that they could use, but they actually had to put a deck on to utilize that. It was going to cost them more money. I'm sorry, that's a life safety issue. You need to have that door.
Is the 3.0 door a fire retardant door?
No, it's just the size, the width of egress,
Okay.
and it has to be a hinge door.
Got it, okay.
So, emergency response and citizen complaints. We work, and this again is where I was talking as far as the zoning, we work with the health department, fire department, law enforcement, Department of Social Services, and planning and zoning. Anytime they get a complaint. It may not be something that falls under our oversight, but we are always there to assist and help to try to determine what or if there is any issues. When notified by the sheriff, 911, police, or the fire department, we try to respond as quickly as possible when they call. I can't tell you how many times I've been out in the middle of the night because of tree has gone through a roof and they need to have somebody there to say, is it safe to be in that house? Fire, different things. So we're there to assist with that. Erosion and sediment control. Provide a high level of customer service on erosion and sediment control and stormwater management. Assist applicants in filing the permits. Also, again, with the stormwater management, because on the residential, while they don't have to actually go through DEQ on some pieces of it, they do have to have this long form on site just in case that one of the inspectors shows up. So we have those forms available and we tell them where that's actually at so that they can print it out. There are pieces that they do need to fill out and we try to assist them as much as possible. Provide an erosion and sediment control on every inspection. This is an inspection for every permit that is issued that requires erosion and sediment control. Provide for rain event inspections. Perform all required reviews of the projects. Work with DEQ with their review process. Pre-construction conference meetings. Provide oversight in conjunction with DEQ, maintain all required records for DEQ program review that takes place, and update the erosion and sediment control regulations to maintain approval status through DEQ. That's what we just went through about 2 or 3 months ago when I came before you to get the update as far as Chapter 150.
Now, didn't you also do this here recently with the stripping of the land down in the...
Yes, I'm still actually working on that, and that's one of the reasons that you don't have a plan in front of you because they had to resubmit it. The original plan did not meet the requirements, so I've got the plan. It came in last Tuesday. I have not gotten to it just yet, but I am in the middle of reviewing that plan. So if you'd like to look at it, you can, but until I get it approved, it's really not right there.
I asked the town manager for it was because I was fielding all these emails and calls
Yes.
because it is in my district
Yep.
and I had no idea of, I could see what they had done, but didn't know exactly where it was going to end to be able to tell people, what their plan at that point was for it to look like. The assumption was it's going to be riprap all the way from the bridge to bridge. So, and after hearing their conversation, I thought, well, he didn't send it to me because they're rethinking the whole thing. So.
Actually, they are allowed to do the riprap, and they're probably going to choose. It's not something that the erosion and sediment control can dictate that you have to do it a certain way. So there still will be processes that they'll go through as far as trying to get it so that it's something different than what their intent is at this point in time. And one of the pieces, and I don't know if you knew it or not, is this was a court order mandated to the town.
I learned that
Yes.
day.
Yes.
That was part of the education I got.
Yep.
I didn't realize that was part of where they had to do, I'm not sure it's the exact wording, that because of their sewer, the
Mhm.
I&I problem,
Yep.
that's a bad thing, so they have to do a good thing. And yeah, this good thing doesn't look that good right now, but.
Yes, yep. So there are a lot of pieces that move behind the scenes and that go on. It's a very complicated process, and that's one of the reasons my choice or my perception to the board at the time was not to take on the stormwater management because they're still learning that entire piece, DEQ. They find new facts and information on a daily basis. If we had taken it on as Paige has, DEQ then comes after the locality as opposed to coming after the individual who's doing what's incorrect in their eyes. So we're still working that out, and I think DEQ within the next few years is going to require the localities to take it on, which is what they did with erosion and sediment control. That's going to be an expense.
It's called intergovernmental dumping.
Yes. Here's the regulation, I don't want it anymore, so you deal with it.
Well, I went to a meeting in Page County with the DEQ had within the year,
Mhm.
and I was actually surprised that I thought DEQ was more preventative and proactive versus,
Reactive,
yeah,
yes, they are
okay to
very,
dump it. We don't test what you're dumping until there's a problem with what you dump.
yep.
Makes no sense to me.
More and more people at DEQ have glue stuck to the bottom of their pants. Connects to the chair.
And right now with COVID, that is becoming prevalent again because they're
They have
sequestered.
an excuse to
Yes,
do that.
yes. So, now, to the $45,000 question.
And
So
I know you're implementing a new software system.
we have got it, we're still in the process of developing it. It is, hopefully in January, we will be live to actually do permits online and everything else. We're going to get a test audience, but the software configuration, development, and maintenance. Software system has changed dramatically in the digital world. The software system is very configurable and continually making improvements as to how we can make it work better for ourselves and our clients. Since there are multiple people and departments inputting information into the system, continual verification of this is required to ensure that the data is accurate. What I mean by that is that we have oversight of the largest portion of the budget. Planning and zoning has their portion of what they do within Intergov, as well as the town planning and zoning. If any one of us puts in a contact, that contact should be utilized throughout its life. If somebody from the town, and this is where it usually happens, and I don't mean to pick on it, but somebody in the town puts in a contact that is identical but slightly different, we have two contacts now. Now our job is trying to refine and get that so it's into one, so that when you come in and say, hey, John Smith did such and such, did he do it before? If there's 3 contacts in there, I'm not sure how well you're going to find that information out, but we try to.
Do you have a database administrator who kind of monitors that for you or no?
It's something that's going to be in my budget this year to request.
I need to stop giving people ideas.
Well, I will tell you that we've had fantastic support, specifically from Taryn's department, for the GIS, as well as some of the other aspects involved with this, because the GIS, this system is built on the GIS system, so that we can keep that information in the accurate and in the proper location. Doug Sexton was a fantastic individual for that information. Unfortunately, you don't keep people all the time. He chose to move on. In fact, he went to a jurisdiction that's using one of our competitors. He and I have talked a little bit because he's finding things, okay, well, how do I do this? Or, okay, well, there's only so much I can tell you about the other one, but
You have prior GIS.
yes,
Okay.
yes. Now Emma's doing a fantastic job with regards to this. But we still need somebody to actually be able to have a sole responsibility of doing the maintenance on the system to verify this information is going in accurately. One of my, my permit center supervisor, I'm looking to try to bump up to that because she has been the lion's share of developing all of our processes. In fact, that's what she's doing right now for the online portion of it. But that's for another topic at this point in time. I won't go into that. But again, the planning department has been vital in taking care of that as far as for the GIS function. I'll move on to the next one. End of this presentation. I do want to thank Taryn because I actually did steal, if you hadn't realized it, that presentation looks awful like hers. So I grabbed hers and I utilized the layout so that I didn't have to reconfigure something. And that way a little bit more consistent for you. Any questions that you have?
Do you have enough certified inspectors to do everything that you need to do?
No.
Are they in the process of actually being trained to be those types of?
Continually, yes. Right now, I have one that is delayed because of COVID-related issues, because of not his, but because of trying to get in to get tested, to try to get courses. DEQ, one of those big animals in the room. If you don't pass the test the first time, which is a 3-hour test, it is open book, but it is extremely difficult. You have to go back and take all of your classes again. And the reason that is because originally they had an 18-month time frame that you could do this. In the middle of this, they said, we're going to change this to a year. He was outside of his year. So he and one other inspector actually had to go back and take the classes all over again just to sit for the test again. Now, the one inspector's already got his test taken. The other one's waiting. He's, I think, scheduled in January or early February. But because of COVID, they've shortened the windows as far as how many people they can take and how long it's going to
They
be
should give
pushed.
you exceptions, though. My goodness.
Jan Breeden is one of the top-notch instructors for DEQ. He explained it to us in class one time. He said, we give exceptions and waivers and extensions to this all the time. 1 year before your expiration is given,
Right.
we send you an email, and you have that entire year to get it taken care of. After the deadline, you go in and you sit for the test again. There's no lenience.
Yeah, exception after that.
Yes.
I get it.
And quite frankly, when DCR had the program, the state, the code actually says they had to at least give the test twice a year. DCR chose to give the test twice a year. That was the only 2 times you could take it because the code said 2 times a year. They literally read it as it was written.
Oh, my goodness.
So,
Instead of that we could do it more,
yes,
we'll just do.
A literal, yeah, they're just literal.
yes. So.
Thank you, Mr. Reed. I had no idea.
It is, well, one of the things I would have liked to have done, and I decided not to, I was going to roll a card in here to show you all the code books that we actually have to deal with on a daily basis. We have one permit that is still open from 1992, which is under the 1985 BOCA code. But it's still active, it's still out there, they're not doing anything. But that particular one has actually tried to be taken to, well, it's actually been taken to court by planning and zoning, prior zoning administrator. And the court said, you can't prove to me that the person's living there. Well, here's the mailing address, it doesn't matter. You can't prove to me that the person's living there. So that permit is still open. They don't want to close it, but it's still there.
Can you not take a video of them going in and out or staying overnight or something?
Didn't matter. Yeah, and that was the way the court ruled it.
Then there's nothing you do, yeah.
But with that, I'll close unless there are questions.
Questions, guys? Gals? Outnumbered today.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you, appreciate it. Motion to
Motion
adjourn?
to adjourn.